Time for this week's Big Picture Rumble. I'm joined tonight by Jamie Weinstein, Deputy Director of the Daily Caller, Erica Canuti, a Democratic strategist, and Seton Motley, President of lessgovernment.org. Okay, let's get started, guys. This week, of course, the big story is the ongoing unrest in Egypt. A week that started with massive peaceful protests calling for President Hosni Mubarak to step down after 30 years of rule, soon devolved into violent clashes in the streets that left hundreds injured and killed nearly a dozen people. Meanwhile, the right wing is jumping all over President Obama for how he's handling the situation, with claims that Obama is on the verge of losing Egypt. What does that mean? And just this week, Senator McCain had this to say about Egypt.
This virus is spreading throughout the Middle East. This, I would argue, is probably the most dangerous period of history of our entire involvement in the Middle East, at least.
Since the 40s? So has the right gone completely nuts? Arguably World War I even, and forgotten about the ideals this country was founded on? Or do they only like democracy when it's brought about by force of the U.S. military, like in Iraq and Afghanistan? Jamie.
Edmund Burke wrote that circumstances matter.
In 1799.
Right. Speaking of the French Revolution,
Yes.
his words still ring true today. I think that I'm one of the biggest supporters of the freedom agenda there is. However, circumstances do matter, and this is a very scary situation. I can explain to you what it means why this is a very dangerous situation. Is that if you lose Egypt, in the sense that you lose a government that wants to keep the peace treaty of 1979. That keeps the blockade of Gaza and cooperates in the war on terror. These are serious repercussions for the United States. Yes, Mubarak's a bad guy, but it doesn't mean that we're going to get something better out of this revolution.
Erica, what government could Egypt possibly have that would turn down $1.5 to $2 trillion a year to maintain a peace agreement with Israel?
I mean, I think there's no real incentive for Egypt to not make peace with Israel. They've been war-torn for many decades, and many generations have lost brothers, husbands, sons to this kind of fighting. I think that they do want stability. I think the biggest problem is that having an absolute dictator for so long without having a vice president or a clear chain of succession is that this is exactly the worst case scenario of supporting unequivocally these types of dictatorships, where you end up where there really isn't any structure, there isn't a real way to negotiate with the organizers of the protest, because it's all kind of loosely organized. Although I would say I find it very disheartening that John McCain called democracy a virus that is threatening the Middle East.
Is it a virus, Seton?
We have no idea whether this is a democracy movement or not. We just know it's an anti-Mubarak movement.
Exactly.
The only organized entity in Egypt besides Mubarak.
Wait a minute. People are openly calling for democracy.
Of course they are, Tom, because people like you buy it.
No. I think people
all
over the world buy it.
The only organized entity.
There are over 100 countries now that call themselves democratic. There's only four, arguably, that had it at the barrel of a gun.
The only organized entity in Egypt, and I know I'm bleeding into the next segment, besides Mubarak's government and the army, is the Muslim Brotherhood. And they're the ones that have, in many swaths, commandeered this quote-unquote democratic movement.
The Muslim Brotherhood is sclerotic. It's aging. Yeah. It's without significant influence.
This is the situation we have. I won't say it's the only group that's protesting. That's ridiculous.
No, I didn't say that. I said it's the only organized entity.
It's the only organized entity. It is the most organized entity. They have maybe up to 30%. They would get in a vote, maybe more. Even if you're not a card-carrying member of the Muslim Brotherhood. A recent Pew poll showed that 82% of the Egyptian people support death penalty for those who convert away from Islam. 84% support the death penalty for adultery. These are the type of people that would support the Muslim Brotherhood in an election. This is a very dangerous situation.
This in any of the Muslim countries. I mean, it's like
Egypt
death penalty questions
here. Incredibly secular country.
Okay.
Because of Mubarak.
Let me just wrap this. I see this as the Nixon lost Cuba, Jimmy Carter lost Iran opportunity moment for the Republican Party, and they're going to try and make the most of it no matter how it plays out.
Weren't they right, though? Weren't they right about Iran?
We will see. We will see. Well, arguably.
It's still
nearly every single news bureau reporting in Egypt is telling a story of pro-democracy protesters standing up to a dictator of 30 years and demanding a new leader. That's every single news bureau except two: Egyptian State Television and Fox News. Fox News is reporting a different story and a more fearful one. Take a look.
If the Muslim Brotherhood take Egypt, it destabilizes the entire Middle East.
They are jihadists who hate America and who will help al-Qaeda all day long.
They seek to establish an Islamic caliphate.
The Muslim Brotherhood's supporters went out into the street too, which explains the increase in violence.
They want to establish some sort of Taliban-like regime. Then we have a serious problem.
The Muslim Brotherhood is armed, and every terrorist organization in the Middle East is now going to go in and offer them support.
The police and military cannot overcome the Muslim Brotherhood there in Egypt.
It's really become like the mothership for jihadists throughout the Middle East.
Once they start to work in concert, Europe is done.
Doomed. Of course, experts in both Egypt and around the world have flatly rejected Fox's, and only Fox's, claims that the Muslim Brotherhood is coming to power in Egypt, and that hasn't slowed the network down. So why doesn't Fox want a revolution in Egypt? Why does Fox support a dictator?
I studied a little bit the Muslim Brotherhood when I was a graduate student at the London School of Economics. They are a serious organization. They have been there since the 1920s.
I'm not asserting they're not.
And if they have, it's not even if they claim power, which they may in an Iran-style type revolution where they purge the democracy elements after they take power, as not only Fox News is worried about, but so are people like Stanford Iranian studies scholar Abbas Milani, who's mentioned that this is something that he fears as well. So it's not some, just Fox News. Very serious people are worried about this as well. But even if, Tom, they do not gain, the upper hand, they're going to be a serious influence in the government. And as the Muslim Brotherhood has said, they want to end the peace treaty with Israel, which has been a 30-year stabilizing force.
There is no monolithic Muslim Brotherhood right now. There are factions of the Muslim Brotherhood, and many of them are actually vocally in support of maintaining the peace treaty.
So they
with
say
Israel.
now.
And,
so they say now.
Well, you just
yes.
your argument was just so they say just a second ago. Eric,
I don't think they would lie about wanting to end the peace treaty. There's no advantage to that.
I mean, I think that it's very odd that the same news outlet that threatens and makes these gestures of how terrible it is that we're ending democracy here in the United States and like to kind of make that claim about health care as leading to all of this terrible dictatorship and socialism, here are suddenly, again, advocating for that someplace else. They talked about Iraq as though, we're bringing this great democracy, same with Afghanistan, how important democracy was to bring to this area, and now suddenly democracy is something to be afraid of. I mean,
it's not a democracy.
It's working out great in Afghanistan, isn't it? I mean,
we do not know. We're in the bottom of the second inning in Egypt. We do not know it's a democracy movement.
We don't necessarily know that.
Democracy is scary stuff.
This narrative is also simplistic. The idea that the right is all for against this and the left is for it.
I'm saying Fox News.
Fox News
Weekly Standard, who many of their commentators go on Fox News, Bill Kristol, for instance, is for this democracy movement. There's an open split.
It's not showing on Fox News.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Look at
Bill
the panel.
Kristol's on there all the time, and I'm disagreeing with him on this. Listen, we do not know this is a democracy movement. What we do know is that whatever comes after is probably not going to be pro-Western. It's probably not going to be pro-Israel.
How can you say that a country where half the country is under 30 and hates the dictator is pro-Western?
And they're calling for an election. I mean, they're calling for a democracy. I mean, that's an election.
That's what happened in Iran in '79 too.
Right, but it's not 1979. This is in Iran.
Why not? What about the 1979 comparison? Don't you like?
I'm just saying that
because in 1979
they thought they were overthrowing the United States.
1979, Khomeini teamed up with merchants and other democracy elements to take over the country. Once entrenched in power, he purged those elements.
Yep.
That's the fear.
But that's
a serious.
The Shah of Iran came to the United States. The Shah had
it's vitally.
There was a very I understand, but there's a very big difference between the President of the United States going to Egypt and saying governments are only legitimate if they derive their legitimacy from the people, which Obama did, and the way that we were.
Why didn't he do that? Why didn't he do that with the Green Revolution in Iran? Why didn't he do that with the Green Revolution in Iran?
Because it's apples and oranges.
No,
because Jimmy Carter made a mistake in that case. He didn't handle that right, and bringing the Shah in, it didn't handle it right. But in my mind, the bottom line here is that the chamber Chamber of Commerce
wrong.
is lobbying really hard to maintain Mubarak because it's a very profitable enterprise. You got some very large companies there.
Tony Podesta, very close to the president, is the chief lobbyist for the Mubarak regime.
You've got some very profitable companies in Egypt that have actually gotten waivers on human rights, and that's frankly I think why the right is going after this. We'll be back with more of the Rumble right after this.